Have you ever wondered why some prayers seem to vanish into thin air while others manifest with astonishing precision? What if everything you thought you knew about prayer was actually limiting its power in your life? For centuries, we've approached prayer as a desperate plea to a distant deity, hoping, wishing, and sometimes begging for divine intervention. But what if I told you that true prayer operates according to precise spiritual laws, just as reliable as gravity or thermodynamics? Has this ever happened to you? You pray fervently for something, repeating the same words over and over, yet nothing changes. You're left wondering if anyone is even listening. The truth is, prayer isn't what most of us have been taught. It's not about convincing God to grant your wishes or proving your worthiness through repetitive rituals. Prayer, in its purest form, is a bridge, a conscious connection between your human awareness and the divine realm that operates according to exact principles. Stay with me until the end of this video series, because what you're about to discover might completely transform your relationship with the divine. The science of prayer reveals that God doesn't need to be persuaded or moved to action. Divine principles respond to your thought patterns and consciousness, not to emotional pleas or bargaining. Perhaps the most revolutionary concept is this: everything your soul legitimately desires has already been created in the divine mind. The abundance, health, peace, and love you seek aren't things you need to beg for. They already exist in spiritual form. Your prayer isn't creating something new, it's aligning your consciousness with what already is. Think about that for a moment. What if prayer isn't about asking at all, but about receiving? What if it's less about speaking and more about listening? What if the power of prayer lies not in changing God's mind, but in changing your own consciousness to recognize what has always been available? What you're about to discover might surprise you, because it challenges everything conventional religion has taught about our relationship with the divine. The science of prayer isn't mystical or magical. It's a practical application of spiritual laws that anyone can master with understanding and practice. In the next segment, we'll explore exactly how these spiritual principles operate and the specific techniques that transform prayer from wishful thinking into a powerful creative force. If this understanding of prayer as a science, rather than mere supplication, is resonating with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Has there been a moment in your life when you felt your prayers were answered, not because you begged, but because something shifted in your consciousness? Your story might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today to transform their own understanding of divine connection. You know, I've noticed something beautiful happening in this community. Every time someone shares their experience with prayer in the comments, it creates ripples of insight that touch others in profound ways. This channel is becoming a gathering place for souls who are ready to move beyond traditional religious frameworks into a deeper spiritual understanding. If you're finding value in this exploration of prayer as a science, giving this video a like helps others discover it too. Each thumbs up signals to the algorithm that this content matters, allowing these ideas to reach those who might be struggling with their own relationship to prayer and spirituality. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider joining our growing spiritual family. Your subscription isn't just a button click, it's a statement that you're committed to expanding your consciousness and exploring the deeper truths about our divine nature. It also helps ensure these messages continue to reach you and others who are walking a similar path of spiritual discovery. Now, let's return to this revolutionary concept of prayer as alignment rather than pleading. When you understand that divine principles operate through consciousness rather than through bargaining, everything changes. Just as a radio doesn't beg for music, but simply tunes to the frequency where music already exists, your prayers work by tuning your consciousness to the spiritual realities that are already present. This revelation transforms our entire understanding of the prayer journey. You see, you're not just asking for divine intervention. You're actively participating in the manifestation process. This hidden truth shifts your mindset from being a passive recipient to becoming a co-creator with the divine mind. In essence, prayer is not something done to you or for you. It's something done through you and with you. Think about the profound impact this has on your spiritual practice. When you pray, you're not convincing God to change reality. You're aligning your consciousness with a truth that already exists in the spiritual realm, allowing it to flow into physical expression. This is the authentic power behind every meaningful transformation in your life. The wisdom traditions have always known this, though it's often been veiled behind religious language. Your words and thoughts are not empty vibrations. They are creative forces that plant seeds in universal consciousness. This is why affirmation becomes so critical to effective prayer. When you affirm spiritual truth rather than dwelling on problems, you're essentially programming the field of infinite possibilities. Consider how differently this works in practice. Instead of saying, "God, please heal my illness," the scientific approach to prayer would affirm, "Divine wholeness flows through me now, restoring perfect balance to every cell." Do you see the fundamental shift? One statement speaks from lack, while the other declares from fullness. One focuses on the problem, the other embodies the solution. This decision, to affirm rather than plead, represents one of the most powerful revelations on your spiritual journey. Every time you speak from the perspective of what already is in spiritual reality, rather than what appears to be missing in material reality, you're engaging in genuine co-creation. Your consciousness becomes the bridge through which invisible good becomes visible expression. This isn't magical thinking. It's understanding the mechanics of how consciousness shapes experience. The universe responds not to your words alone, but to the energetic signature behind them. When you affirm with certainty, feeling the truth of your statement despite contrary appearances, you've mastered the art of scientific prayer. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how your emotional state amplifies or diminishes the power of your affirmations. You see, words alone aren't enough. They must be charged with feeling, with absolute certainty. Think of it as spiritual electricity, providing the current that brings your prayer to life. This is why merely repeating positive phrases without genuine belief often produces minimal results. The most effective prayers combine clear affirmative statements with deep emotional resonance. When you declare, "I am abundantly provided for in all ways," while simultaneously feeling the security, gratitude, and peace that comes with true abundance, you create an unstoppable prayer. This emotional component isn't just supportive, it's essential to the entire process. If you're recognizing how your approach to prayer has been limiting its effectiveness in your life until now, type "awakening" in the comments. This simple acknowledgement marks the beginning of a profound shift in how you engage with the divine. The mental law that governs prayer operates with mathematical precision, yet most of us have never been taught its mechanisms. This hidden truth reveals why identical prayers spoken by different people yield entirely different results. It's not about divine favoritism or random miracles. It's about alignment with universal principles that respond consistently to specific mental and emotional frequencies. Every thought you sustain with faith and emotional intensity becomes a seed planted in the fertile soil of consciousness. The universe doesn't distinguish between what you want and what you fear. It responds to what you consistently hold in mind with feeling. This is why anxious prayer often manifests the very situations we're desperately trying to avoid. The mindset behind your words matters more than the words themselves. Consider how this revelation transforms your entire approach to spiritual practice. When you understand that prayer operates by law rather than by whim or favor, you discover that divine response is not a matter of worthiness, but of alignment. Just as gravity doesn't judge whether you deserve to fall, It simply responds when certain conditions are met. Prayer operates through principles that respond to your inner state rather than your outer worthiness. The journey toward effective prayer requires recognizing that the universe responds more to your vibrational state than to your verbal requests. Think of your emotional state as the electrical current that powers your words. Without this current, your affirmations remain lifeless, beautiful phrases without activating energy. This explains why mechanically repeating positive statements often yields minimal impact on your circumstances. Behind the scenes of every powerful prayer is a feeling state that matches the desired outcome. When you declare abundance while feeling lack, your vibration contradicts your words. But when you generate genuine feelings of gratitude, security, and joy, as if your good is already present, you activate prayer's creative power at its deepest level. This emotional coherence is what Jesus referred to when he said, "Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." The mastery of this principle represents one of the most significant mindset shifts on your spiritual journey. Most of us have been taught to pray from a place of need, describing problems in detail and begging for solutions. Yet this approach energizes the very conditions we wish to change. Scientific prayer reverses this pattern completely, feeling the solution as accomplished, even while the problem appears to persist. Your emotional state acts as a tuning fork, broadcasting a specific frequency to the universe. Prayer is less about informing God of what you need and more about tuning yourself to the frequency where your good already exists. This vibrational coherence doesn't require spiritual perfection. It simply requires practice, awareness, and the willingness to feel what doesn't yet appear to your physical senses. What's fascinating about this approach is how it bridges ancient spiritual wisdom with modern understanding of quantum physics and energy fields. The revelations about vibration and consciousness that mystics have taught for centuries are now being validated through scientific exploration of how observation affects reality at fundamental levels. Your consciousness is not separate from the field of creation. It's an active, participatory force within it. When you truly grasp that feeling is the activating power behind prayer, you'll begin consciously cultivating emotional states that match your desired outcomes. If you're seeking peace, generate peace within regardless of external chaos. If you're seeking abundance, cultivate the feeling of sufficiency despite apparent lack. If this principle resonates with your intuition about how prayer really works, type vibration in the comments. One of the most profound revelations in understanding scientific prayer is recognizing that you're not creating something new with your practice. You're aligning your consciousness to receive what already exists in spiritual form. This subtle but revolutionary mindset shift transforms everything about how you approach your connection with the divine. Instead of seeing yourself as a petitioner waiting for creation, you become a receiver tuning into a broadcast that's already transmitting. Think about what happens when you turn on a radio. You're not creating the music, it's already being broadcast. Your action is simply adjusting the receiver to the correct frequency. This powerful metaphor illuminates the true nature of prayer. The abundance, health, peace, or clarity you seek already exists in its perfect spiritual form. Your task isn't to create it through fervent pleading, but to shift your consciousness to a state that can receive it. The journey from traditional to scientific prayer represents one of the most liberating transformations in spiritual development. Behind the scenes of every prayer that seems to work miraculously is this hidden truth. You weren't heard because you begged more convincingly. You simply aligned your consciousness with what was already given. This explains why some prayers seem instantly answered, while others appear to vanish without response. What makes this approach so revolutionary is how it bypasses the entire framework of supplication. When you understand that divine principles operate through consciousness rather than through bargaining, you move beyond begging from need and into declaring from understanding. This isn't about pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing a higher reality that supersedes temporary appearances. Consider how differently this works in practice. Traditional prayer says, "Please God, if it be your will, help me find a job." Scientific prayer declares, "I am now aligned with divine purpose and perfect expression. The right opportunity is already mine by spiritual law." One approach positions you as a helpless beginner hoping for mercy. The other establishes you as a conscious participant in the creative process, claiming what is already yours by divine right. The impact of this revelation extends far beyond formal prayer times. It reshapes your entire approach to challenges, decisions, and apparent limitations. When faced with what seems to be lack or difficulty, you no longer engage in desperate appeals, but in conscious alignment. You shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to affirming, "This situation is already resolved in divine mind, and I now align with that perfect resolution." This doesn't mean we never ask for guidance or assistance. Rather, it means we ask from a different place within ourselves, not from desperation, but from communion with the source. We recognize that the answer doesn't need to be created. It already exists and merely awaits our conscious recognition. This subtle but profound distinction eliminates the anxiety, doubt, and uncertainty that often accompany traditional prayers. The wisdom traditions have always hinted at this approach. Though religious, language has often obscured it. Jesus didn't teach his disciples to beg, he taught them to declare with authority. He didn't instruct them to convince God of their worthiness, but to recognize their inherent unity with divine mind. Every healing, every miracle emerged not from magical intervention, but from consciousness aligned with spiritual reality. This perspective on prayer offers a liberation from the exhausting cycle of pleading and waiting that characterizes so much of traditional spiritual practice. If you found yourself resonating with this fundamentally different approach to prayer, type alignment in the comments to signal your recognition of this deeper understanding. When we look closely at the prayers of Jesus, we discover a remarkable pattern that reveals the true nature of scientific prayer. His approach wasn't based on uncertainty or pleading. It was grounded in absolute certainty that divine good was already present, even before any visible evidence appeared. Perhaps the most revealing example was at Lazarus's tomb, where he declared, "Father, I thank you because you have heard me," before the miracle had physically manifested. This profound mindset shift illustrates the revolutionary approach to prayer that transcends traditional religious understanding. Notice that Jesus didn't say, "Father, please hear me now," or, "If it be your will, bring Lazarus back." He expressed gratitude for what was already accomplished in the spiritual realm before it appeared in the physical. This principle of praying from the consciousness of completion rather than from the consciousness of need represents one of the most transformative revelations in spiritual practice. It's not about pretending. It's about perceiving a deeper reality that exists beyond physical appearances. The journey toward mastering this approach requires developing what mystics have called the eyes of the soul. Your capacity to visualize and hold clear mental images with absolute certainty. This inner vision isn't fantasy or escapism. Rather, it's the conscious recognition of spiritual reality before it expresses in physical form. In the architecture of manifestation, visualization serves as the blueprint that precedes construction. Nothing can appear in your experience that hasn't first been held in consciousness. Behind the scenes of every miracle is this hidden truth. Before matter rearranged itself, someone held a clear, unwavering image of the desired outcome with such certainty that the universe had no choice but to conform. This isn't magical thinking, it's understanding the precise mechanics of how consciousness shapes reality. Your inner vision creates a mold into which spiritual substance pours, eventually solidifying into physical experience. The impact of developing this visualization capacity extends far beyond formal prayer times. It transforms your entire approach to challenges and opportunities. When facing what appears to be illness, rather than focusing on symptoms, you hold the image of perfect functioning with such clarity that your body begins responding to the blueprint rather than to the apparent condition. When confronting financial limitation, instead of dwelling on lack, you visualize abundance flowing with such conviction that new channels begin opening in response to your inner vision. What makes this method so powerful is how it bypasses the analytical mind that says, "This is impossible based on current conditions." The eyes of the soul see from a higher vantage point, where possibilities aren't constrained by material appearances. From this perspective, the seemingly miraculous becomes natural, not through violation of universal law, but through higher application of spiritual principles that govern all manifestation. The wisdom traditions have always taught that revelation precedes manifestation. Moses saw the promised land before his people entered it. Noah built the ark before rain appeared. In each case, the inner vision held with certainty created the pathway for eventual physical expression. Your capacity to see completed what has not yet manifested represents one of your most powerful spiritual faculties. Developing this visualization skill requires practice and mental discipline. Begin with simple images held briefly, then progress to more complex scenarios sustained for longer periods. The key is emotional congruence, feeling the reality of what you visualize rather than merely picturing it intellectually. This emotional component charges the image with transformative power, creating a resonance that begins attracting corresponding circumstances. If you've experienced moments when you clearly visualized an outcome that later materialized in surprising ways, type "inner vision" in the comments. These experiences aren't coincidences, they're glimpses of your natural creative capacity operating through spiritual law. One of the most transformative revelations on this spiritual journey is understanding the profound difference between carnal and spiritual visualization. Many approaches to manifestation teach visualization as a technique to acquire what you lack, picturing yourself with the money you don't have, the relationship you're missing, or the health you've lost. While this approach may occasionally produce results, it contains a fundamental flaw that limits its effectiveness. It originates from a consciousness of emptiness rather than fullness. True, spiritual visualization emerges from a completely different mindset. Instead of visualizing from a place of need, trying to complete what's missing, it stems from the recognition of what already exists in spiritual form. This subtle but crucial distinction represents one of the hidden truths behind effective prayer. When you visualize from fullness, you're not creating something new. You're recognizing and accepting what already is in the divine mind. Consider how differently these approaches feel emotionally. Carnal visualization often carries an undercurrent of anxiety, striving, and fear that the desired outcome won't materialize. There's a desperate quality to it, a sense of reaching for something just beyond your grasp. Spiritual visualization, by contrast, emerges from a place of deep peace, certainty, and gratitude. You're not reaching for anything. You're simply acknowledging what already belongs to you by divine right. This profound shift in consciousness affects the entire mechanism of manifestation. Your visualization becomes less about crafting detailed scenarios of what you want and more about clearing your perception to see what's already been given. It's like wiping clean a foggy window rather than trying to paint a new scene. The good you seek doesn't need to be created. It already exists and simply awaits your recognition. The journey toward mastering this approach naturally leads us to the question of doubt, perhaps the greatest obstacle to effective prayer. Doubt isn't merely an emotional state, it's a divided consciousness that sends mixed signals to the universe. When you affirm abundance while secretly believing in lack, you create a vibrational contradiction that neutralizes your prayer's effectiveness. Behind the scenes of every seemingly unanswered prayer is this spiritual principle at work. The universe doesn't respond to what you want, but to what you truly believe and feel. Doubt doesn't just weaken prayer, it fundamentally alters what you're creating through your consciousness. The revelations about how doubt functions explain why identical prayers produce dramatically different results for different people. The pathway to eliminating doubt isn't through forcing yourself to believe or through positive thinking techniques. These approaches often create an internal struggle that actually strengthens doubt through resistance. Instead, doubt dissolves naturally through spiritual understanding, recognizing that what you affirm must manifest by law, not by luck or divine favor. Just as you don't doubt that gravity will hold you to the earth, you can develop the same certainty about spiritual principles governing manifestation. This level of understanding transforms prayer from hopeful wishing into confident knowing. It's not about convincing yourself to believe something against all evidence. It's about recognizing a higher law that operates with mathematical precision when correctly applied. The more you understand how consciousness shapes reality according to exact principles, the more doubt naturally recedes without struggle or force. If you're beginning to sense this deeper connection between spiritual understanding and unshakable certainty in your prayer life, type divine law in the comments. Now, I want to go even deeper into what faith truly means within the context of scientific prayer. There's a profound misconception that has limited spiritual seekers for centuries, the idea that faith is blind. Belief, a desperate hope against all evidence, or the willingness to accept something without questioning. This distortion has reduced faith to a kind of spiritual gambling, a leap into darkness with fingers crossed. The revelation that transforms prayer's effectiveness is recognizing that authentic faith has nothing to do with blindness or desperation. True faith is intelligent, a calm certainty based on understanding universal laws that govern consciousness and manifestation. It's not hoping against hope. It's knowing with quiet confidence. Think of how differently you approach situations where you have complete certainty versus those filled with doubt. This mindset distinction changes everything about how your prayers function. Consider how you approach gravity. You don't hope it will work when you place a glass on a table. You know with absolute certainty that it will remain there. You don't cross your fingers when you drop something, wondering if it might fall upward instead of downward. You have intelligent faith in gravitational law based on consistent experience and understanding. This same level of certainty can be developed regarding spiritual principles that respond to consciousness with equal precision. The journey toward this kind of faith involves a fundamental transformation in how you relate to universal principles. Behind the scenes of every spiritual master's seemingly miraculous demonstrations was this hidden truth. They weren't performing supernatural feats. They were applying higher natural laws with perfect understanding. Their certainty wasn't based on emotional intensity, but on clear comprehension of how consciousness shapes reality according to exact principles. This revelation about intelligent faith naturally connects to another fundamental aspect of scientific prayer, the creative power of your words. Every word you speak is far more than mere sound or communication. It's a vibratory declaration charged with intention that shapes your experience. The ancient wisdom traditions weren't being poetic when they taught that death and life are in the power of the tongue. They were describing a precise spiritual mechanism by which consciousness creates reality. Your words function as commands to the universe, not because the universe is listening to your voice, but because words are the outward expression of your consciousness. They reveal and reinforce your deepest beliefs, amplifying them into the creative field that surrounds you. This explains why casual statements like, "I always get sick this time of year," or "I never have enough money," often manifest with surprising accuracy. They aren't predictions, they're creative declarations that consciousness honors. The impact of this understanding on your prayer life cannot be overstated. It illuminates why empty repetitions of positive phrases rarely produce lasting change. Words without corresponding consciousness are powerless, like pressing an elevator button that isn't connected to the electrical system. The button itself doesn't summon the elevator, the electrical connection does. Similarly, your words don't create your reality, the consciousness behind them does. This insight leads to a profound decision point in your spiritual journey. Will you continue speaking casually, unconsciously programming limitation and lack, or will you begin choosing words that align with the highest truth you can perceive? The practice of scientific prayer involves becoming increasingly aware of your verbal patterns, recognizing each word as a seed planted in the fertile soil of universal mind. The revelation that transforms our understanding of prayer even further is recognizing that your silent thoughts and internal judgments function as powerful prayers, perhaps even more influential than your spoken words. Behind the scenes of your daily experience lies a continuous stream of mental commentary that most people never recognize as creative force. Those repetitive thoughts about your limitations, those whispered judgments about situations and people, those quiet fears you replay in moments of uncertainty, all of these are functioning as silent decrees that shape your reality with remarkable precision. This hidden truth explains why many people experience situations that directly contradict their conscious desires and formal prayers. When someone affirms abundance during morning meditation, yet spends the rest of the day thinking about lack, which vibration dominates their consciousness? When someone declares health in a moment of focused prayer, but mentally rehearses illness scenarios throughout the day, which blueprint is being transmitted more consistently to the creative field? The mind doesn't categorize thoughts as just thinking versus official prayers. Every thought sustained with emotional intensity functions as a creative seed planted in universal consciousness. This revelation illuminates the profound wisdom behind ancient teachings about guarding your mind and taking thoughts captive. These weren't arbitrary spiritual disciplines, but practical instructions for managing your creative power. The journey toward effective prayer, therefore, requires a comprehensive transformation of your mental landscape. It's not enough to speak truth for a few moments each day if your mind dwells in contradiction during the remaining hours. This explains why some people seem to manifest effortlessly while others struggle despite following identical prayer techniques. The difference lies in the consistency of consciousness throughout ordinary moments, not just during designated spiritual practices. Developing mental discipline represents one of the most crucial mindset shifts on the spiritual path. This doesn't mean forcing yourself never to have negative thoughts. Such struggle often strengthens what you're trying to eliminate. Instead, it means becoming increasingly aware of your mental patterns and gently redirecting your attention toward what you wish to experience rather than what you fear or resent. The impact of this practice extends far beyond formal prayer times into every aspect of daily life. Each moment becomes an opportunity to align your consciousness with spiritual truth rather than apparent limitation. When challenges arise, instead of mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios, you can silently affirm, "Divine wisdom is guiding this situation to perfect resolution." When physical symptoms appear, rather than dwelling on potential problems, you can declare, "Perfect wholeness is my natural state, and my body responds to this truth now." This level of mental discipline doesn't develop overnight. It's a journey of progressive awareness and intentional redirection. Begin by simply noticing your dominant thought patterns without judgment or resistance. This awareness itself begins dissolving unconscious habits that have been creating unwanted experiences. Then, practice consciously choosing thoughts that align with what you wish to manifest rather than what appears in current circumstances. What makes this practice so revolutionary is how it shifts the entire foundation of your spiritual life. Prayer ceases to be an occasional activity and becomes a continuous state of consciousness. You recognize that your mind is always praying through whatever you focus on with emotion and attention. This understanding leads to a profound decision point. Will you continue allowing your mind to pray unconsciously based on habit and reaction, or will you assume conscious direction of this creative power? The decision to speak only what you wish to see manifested, both verbally and mentally, represents one of the most powerful transformations in spiritual practice. It's not about denial or pretending problems don't exist. It's about consciously choosing which reality you energize with your attention. If you're beginning to recognize how your mental habits have been functioning as unconscious prayers all along, type mindful creating in the comments. Now I want to go even deeper into the profound transformation that occurs when prayer evolves beyond words entirely. There exists a dimension of prayer that transcends language, affirmations, and even visualization, a realm where the soul communicates directly with the divine through pure presence and vibration. This silent communion represents not the beginning of prayer, but its most advanced expression, where the need for verbal formulations dissolves into direct spiritual awareness. Many spiritual seekers spend years perfecting affirmations and declarations without realizing that these are merely scaffolding, temporary structures that ultimately give way to silent knowing. Behind the scenes of the greatest spiritual masters' practices was this revelation. Words eventually become unnecessary, not because they lack power, but because the consciousness behind them becomes so purified that it communicates directly. Through presence alone. Think about your closest relationships. In moments of deepest connection, haven't you experienced communication beyond words? A look, a touch, a shared silence that conveyed more than paragraphs of explanation. This same principle applies to your relationship with the divine. As your spiritual journey deepens, you discover a place within where words fall away and communion occurs in stillness. The mindset shift required to access this level of prayer involves releasing the notion that more words equal more power. In the realm of spiritual reality, often the opposite is true. Words can become obstacles, mental constructs that actually separate us from the direct experience they attempt to describe. The journey beyond verbal prayer isn't about emptying the mind into nothingness, but allowing it to rest in pure awareness, where divine wisdom can be directly received. This practice of silent prayer creates a sacred space where divine guidance emerges naturally as intuition, clarity, and inner direction. When the mental chatter of affirmations and petitions quiets, something remarkable happens. You begin to hear rather than merely speak. This receptive dimension of prayer proves just as essential as its expressive aspect, yet it remains largely undiscovered by those who approach spirituality primarily through formulas and techniques. The hidden truth that revolutionizes your prayer life is recognizing that divine intelligence is already communicating with you constantly, not through external voices or dramatic signs, but through the subtle language of intuitive knowing. These quiet impressions that arise in moments of stillness aren't random thoughts, but spiritual guidance seeking expression through your consciousness. Silent prayer creates the receptive field where this guidance can be clearly perceived rather than drowned out by mental noise. This revelation transforms not only how you pray, but your entire approach to decision-making and life. Navigation. Instead of struggling to figure everything out intellectually, you learn to create moments of sacred stillness where solutions emerge organically. Problems that seemed impossibly complex often resolve themselves not through mental effort, but through this receptive dimension of consciousness, where divine intelligence can operate unhindered. The impact of developing this capacity extends far beyond formal meditation times into every aspect of daily life. You begin noticing brief openings throughout the day, moments between activities, pauses in conversation, intervals of quiet, where you can drop into this receptive awareness. These micro moments of silent communion gradually reshape your entire life orientation, from striving to receiving, from controlling to allowing. What makes this practice so powerful is how it bypasses the limitations of your conditioned thinking. Your analytical mind, brilliant as it may be, operates only with known information and established patterns. But the challenges you face often require solutions beyond your current knowledge. Silent prayer opens you to transcendent wisdom that can illuminate paths invisible to ordinary consciousness, revealing breakthrough possibilities where none seem to exist. This journey into the silent dimension of prayer represents perhaps the most profound transformation in spiritual practice, moving from the active effort of speaking to the receptive grace of listening. If you've experienced moments where your deepest guidance came not through mental processing, but through a quiet inner knowing that simply appeared in stillness, type sacred silence in the comments. Now I want to go even deeper into one of the most overlooked yet critical aspects of effective prayer, the transformative power of forgiveness. Behind the scenes of many seemingly unanswered prayers lies a hidden truth that few spiritual seekers fully recognize. Resentment, judgment, and unforgiveness create energetic blockages that literally obstruct the flow of divine energy. These emotional barriers function like dams in a river, preventing the natural current of spiritual power from flowing through your consciousness into manifestation. This revelation illuminates why individuals following identical prayer techniques often experience dramatically different results. One person affirms abundance while holding grudges against those who've wronged them financially. Their prayer struggles to manifest. Another speaks the same affirmation from a consciousness free of resentment. Their words quickly take form in experience. The difference isn't in the technique, but in the clarity of the channel through which divine energy flows. The journey toward effective prayer therefore requires an honest assessment of where you're holding unforgiveness, not just toward others, but toward circumstances, institutions, and even God. Every judgment, every sustained resentment, every refusal to release the past creates another layer of resistance in your spiritual circuitry. The mindset shift that revolutionizes prayer effectiveness involves recognizing forgiveness not as a moral obligation or sign of weakness, but as a practical necessity for spiritual power to flow unimpeded. What makes forgiveness challenging is the misunderstanding that it means condoning harmful actions or reconnecting with toxic individuals. True forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person's behavior or your relationship with them. It's about your internal freedom from emotional bondage. It's a decision to stop carrying the weight of past wounds, not for the offender's benefit, but for your own spiritual liberation. This crucial distinction transforms forgiveness from a seeming sacrifice into a profound act of self-care. While forgiving others is essential, perhaps the most overlooked dimension of spiritual blockage is the inability to forgive oneself. Many prayers don't manifest because people secretly feel unworthy of receiving. They affirm abundance while believing they don't deserve it, declare health while carrying guilt about past choices, or seek love while harboring shame about who they are. This inner conflict creates a vibrational contradiction that neutralizes prayer's effectiveness regardless of the words spoken. The hidden truth that transforms prayer powerfully is recognizing that divine forgiveness isn't something you earn or deserve. It's the natural state of your relationship with universal intelligence. The divine doesn't keep score, hold grudges, or withhold based on past mistakes. This isn't because your actions don't matter, but because the nature of spirit is absolute love that transcends human concepts of merit and punishment. Accepting this unconditional forgiveness requires a profound identity shift from seeing yourself as a flawed being, seeking redemption, to recognizing yourself as an expression of divine perfection, learning through experience. This revelation about self-forgiveness impacts every dimension of your prayer life. When you stop believing you must earn divine favor, you open yourself to receiving naturally and effortlessly. The energy previously consumed by guilt, shame, and self-punishment becomes available for creative expression and spiritual growth. Prayer shifts from being a compensatory activity attempting to overcome unworthiness to a natural communion between your individual consciousness and its universal source. The decision to practice forgiveness, both of others and yourself, represents one of the most practical and immediate ways to enhance prayer effectiveness. Every time you release judgment, every time you let go of resentment, every time you accept yourself exactly as you are, you're literally clearing the channel through which divine power flows. This isn't metaphorical, but an exact description of the energetic mechanics underlying effective prayer. If you're discovering that forgiveness might be the missing key to unlocking your prayer's full potential, type freedom channel in the comments. Now I want to go even deeper into a revolutionary concept that completely transforms our understanding of prayer's role in daily life. The Apostle Paul's instruction to pray without ceasing has often been misinterpreted as an impossible spiritual ideal. After all, how could anyone possibly maintain verbal prayer throughout every waking moment? This misconception has created an artificial separation between spiritual practice and everyday living that limits prayer's transformative potential. The profound revelation that elevates your entire approach to spirituality is recognizing that continuous prayer doesn't mean repeating words endlessly. It means maintaining constant communion with divine presence through awareness. This mindset shift completely reimagines prayer from being something you do occasionally to being a continuous state of consciousness that infuses every dimension of your existence. This isn't about adding another spiritual practice to your already busy life. It's about transforming ordinary moments into sacred expressions. Behind the scenes of every spiritual master's life was this hidden truth. They didn't separate prayer from living. For them, walking became prayer, eating became prayer, working became prayer, conversing became prayer, not through religious overlays but through the quality of presence they brought to each activity. The decision to approach every moment with awareness, gratitude, and spiritual intention transforms your entire existence into a living communication with the divine. This revelation about continuous prayer illuminates why many people feel disconnected from spiritual power despite dedicated practice sessions. They compartmentalize, praying fervently for 20 minutes each morning, then spending the remainder of the day in unconscious patterns driven by habit and reaction. The impact of those 20 minutes, powerful as they might be, becomes diluted by the remaining hours lived from a completely different vibration. The journey toward living prayer involves bringing the same qualities of presence, intention, and awareness that characterize your formal prayer times into ordinary activities. When preparing a meal, instead of cooking mechanically while mentally rehearsing problems, you recognize the sacred act of nourishment and infuse it with gratitude. When driving through traffic, rather than succumbing to impatience, you transform the journey into an opportunity for centered awareness. When conversing with others, instead of engaging superficially, you recognize the divine spark within them. What makes this approach so revolutionary is how it dissolves the artificial boundary between spiritual and secular life. Every activity becomes an opportunity for communion with the divine, not through religious formalities, but through the quality of consciousness you bring to each moment. This transformation doesn't require changing what you do, but how you do it. The awareness, intention, and presence you maintain throughout ordinary experiences. The wisdom traditions have always taught that enlightenment isn't found by escaping ordinary life, but by bringing extraordinary awareness to it. Jesus demonstrated this through his ministry. He didn't separate himself from normal activities, but transformed them through his consciousness. He turned water into wine at a wedding celebration, multiplied loaves during a community meal, and taught profound truths while walking ordinary roads. His entire life demonstrated that any moment, approached with divine awareness, becomes sacred. This perspective on prayer creates a profound shift in spiritual development. Instead of striving to escape the mundane through occasional transcendent experiences, you learn to recognize the sacred dimension present within every moment. The checkout line at the grocery store, the meeting at work, the family dinner, all become opportunities for divine communion when approached with the right consciousness. Living prayer doesn't require perfect spiritual focus at all times. Such expectations create frustration rather than transformation. It involves a progressive awakening to the present moment, gently returning your awareness to divine presence whenever you notice yourself drifting into unconscious patterns. Each time you make this shift, you strengthen the habit of continuous communion that eventually becomes your natural state. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this consciousness of continuous prayer transforms what many consider the most mundane aspects of human existence. There's a profound revelation waiting to be discovered in the most ordinary activities of your daily routine. A hidden dimension of spiritual power that remains largely untapped because we've been conditioned to see certain activities as inherently mundane or meaningless. Think about the activities that fill most of your day: preparing meals, commuting, cleaning your home, responding to emails, participating in meetings, handling paperwork. These experiences constitute the majority of human existence, yet many spiritual seekers unconsciously dismiss them as obstacles to spiritual life rather than opportunities for profound transformation. Behind the scenes of this mindset is a fundamental misunderstanding about where divine presence actually resides. The revolutionary journey begins with a simple but paradigm-shifting decision: to approach these seemingly mundane activities not from automatic habit, but from awakened spiritual consciousness. When you bring full presence to washing dishes, feeling the water, noticing sensations, expressing gratitude for nourishment, you transform what appears ordinary into something sacred. The dishes themselves haven't changed, but your relationship to the experience has undergone a fundamental shift from unconscious routine to mindful communion. This approach doesn't require adding religious elements to everyday tasks. It's not about reciting prayers while driving or visualizing angels while cleaning. It's about bringing the same quality of presence to these activities that you naturally bring to formal meditation or prayer. It's recognizing that divine intelligence isn't confined to churches, temples, or designated spiritual moments. It permeates every molecule of existence, waiting to be recognized within ordinary experience. The transformative impact of this mindset shift extends beyond personal spiritual fulfillment into practical effectiveness. Tasks performed with presence are completed more efficiently and with fewer errors than those done while mentally elsewhere. Interactions approached with spiritual awareness create deeper connections than those conducted mechanically. Decisions made from centered consciousness produce better outcomes than those rushed through from scattered attention. The spiritual becomes profoundly practical. This same revolutionary perspective transforms how we approach praying for others, perhaps one of the most misunderstood dimensions of spiritual practice. Traditional approaches often involve telling God about someone's problems and pleading for intervention, essentially trying to fix what appears broken. This approach, however well-intentioned, often operates from a consciousness of separation that actually reinforces the very conditions we're attempting to change. The hidden truth that revolutionizes intercessory prayer is recognizing that true prayer for others doesn't involve fixing problems, but recognizing perfection. When you pray for someone who appears to be struggling with illness, financial difficulty, or relationship challenges, your highest service isn't cataloging their symptoms or circumstances. It's holding in consciousness the perfect spiritual image of who they truly are beyond temporary appearances, seeing them as God sees them. This profound shift moves intercessory prayer from describing conditions to declaring truth, from focusing on what's wrong to recognizing what's eternally right. Instead of saying, "Please help this person overcome their illness," you might silently affirm, "Divine wholeness is the truth of their being, expressing perfectly now." Rather than pleading, "Help them find financial stability," you recognize divine abundance flows through them now as their natural state of being. What makes this approach so powerful is how it bypasses the limited human perspective that sees only current conditions. Your consciousness, when aligned with spiritual truth, becomes a clear channel through which divine recognition can flow toward another soul. You're not changing them through mental manipulation. You're holding a space of higher awareness that their own consciousness can resonate with if they're receptive. This doesn't mean denying or ignoring someone's apparent struggles. It means seeing beyond them to the deeper reality while extending practical compassion. Jesus demonstrated this approach perfectly. He acknowledged physical conditions while simultaneously perceiving the divine blueprint that superseded temporary appearances. His healing work wasn't about fixing broken humans, but awakening them to their innate wholeness. If you've noticed a fundamental difference in how people respond when you see their challenges versus when you recognize their divine capacity, type "seeing wholeness" in the comments. Now I want to go even deeper into a subtle aspect of praying for others that often creates unintended consequences despite our best intentions. There's a transformative revelation about non-attachment that completely shifts the effectiveness of our prayers for loved ones and even strangers. Behind the scenes of many well-meaning prayers lies a hidden attachment to specific outcomes, a mental picture of exactly how healing should look, which job offer should materialize, or how relationship reconciliation should unfold. This attachment to particular results, though natural from human perspective, often creates an energetic paradox that actually limits divine expression rather than facilitating it. The journey toward mastery in prayer involves a profound mindset shift, learning to hold a clear vision of another's highest good while simultaneously releasing all attachment to how that good manifests. This spiritual balancing act represents one of the most refined aspects of prayer practice. Think about a parent praying for their adult child facing career challenges. The attached approach might specifically visualize them getting a particular job, working in a specific field, or following a predetermined path. The unattached approach holds the vision of their perfect unfoldment, divine guidance, and purposeful expression, without mentally dictating the exact form those qualities should take. This distinction transforms prayer from subtle manipulation to genuine spiritual support. What makes non-attachment so challenging is how it confronts our human desire for control and certainty. We want guarantees, visible results, and outcomes we can recognize and approve. Yet the hidden truth is that attachment to specific forms often blocks greater possibilities that divine intelligence can see, but our limited perspective cannot. When you pray with attachment, you're essentially saying, "I know exactly what form this good should take," a stance that limits the infinite creativity of universal mind. The wisdom traditions have always taught that the highest prayer honors free will and respects each soul's unique journey. Jesus demonstrated this perfectly when he said, "Not my will, but thine be done." This wasn't passive resignation, but profound spiritual understanding, recognition that divine intelligence sees possibilities beyond human planning. This revelation doesn't mean abandoning clear intention, but holding it with open hands rather than clenched fists. This non-attached approach connects directly to another fundamental principle that revolutionizes our understanding of prayer, what might be called the mirror principle. This insight reveals that the visible world is not creating your experience, it's reflecting your consciousness. Every circumstance, relationship, and condition in your life is functioning as a precise mirror, showing you the contents of your own consciousness, often including aspects you're not consciously aware of. The transformation begins when you stop trying to change the reflection, circumstances, and start changing the source, consciousness. Imagine spending hours trying to adjust your appearance by manipulating the mirror itself, rather than changing what the mirror is reflecting. Yet this is precisely how many people approach prayer, focusing intensely on rearranging external conditions while leaving the consciousness creating those conditions untouched. The mirror principle explains why affirmations and visualizations sometimes produce dramatic results and other times seem completely ineffective. When you affirm abundance while unconsciously believing in scarcity, you're attempting to change the reflection while maintaining the image being reflected. The mirror can only show what stands before it. It has no capacity to show something different from what it's reflecting. This revelation shifts your entire approach to manifestation. Instead of focusing primarily on changing conditions, you concentrate on transforming the consciousness that conditions reflect. When you change your consistent thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and expectations, the mirror of life must reflect that transformation, not because you've manipulated external reality, but because you've altered what it's reflecting. The journey toward mastering this principle involves becoming increasingly aware of what your life circumstances are showing you about your own consciousness. Every persistent challenge becomes a valuable messenger, revealing aspects of consciousness ready for transformation. Rather than resisting these messengers, you welcome them as precise feedback mechanisms, showing you exactly where consciousness transformation is needed. Now I want to go even deeper into a fundamental paradigm shift that completely transforms how we understand prayer's mechanics. Most approaches to prayer focus on changing effects, the visible conditions, circumstances, and situations we want to improve. We see illness and pray for healing, experience financial lack and pray for money, face relationship challenges and pray for harmony. This approach seems logical from our human perspective, but it represents a profound misunderstanding of how manifestation actually works. The revolutionary revelation that elevates prayer to a truly scientific practice is recognizing that all visible conditions are effects stemming from invisible causes. Prayer, in its highest form, doesn't attempt to manipulate effects directly. It addresses the spiritual cause generating those effects. This shift from effect thinking to cause thinking represents one of the most significant transformations in your spiritual journey. Think about a garden with withering plants. The novice gardener might focus exclusively on the visible symptoms, wilting leaves, discoloration, stunted growth, and attempt various interventions at this level. The master gardener immediately looks deeper, examining soil conditions, root systems, and environmental factors. They understand that healthy plants naturally emerge from healthy roots and soil. The visible simply expresses the invisible. This same principle applies to every dimension of human experience. Health challenges, financial struggles, relationship difficulties, all are expressions of consciousness operating at causal levels. When you pray by focusing exclusively on changing these visible conditions while maintaining the consciousness that created them, you're essentially treating symptoms while ignoring causes, an approach that may produce temporary relief but rarely creates lasting transformation. The decision to shift your prayer focus from manipulating effects to transforming causes aligns you with how manifestation actually works. Instead of declaring, "I want this physical condition to disappear," you recognize, "I now embody the consciousness of perfect wholeness." Rather than pleading, "I need more money to pay these bills," you affirm, "I am one with the infinite abundance of universal supply." This isn't semantic wordplay, but a fundamental reorientation that addresses the actual source of manifestation. This causal approach to prayer explains why seemingly identical circumstances yield completely different outcomes for different people. The external situation isn't creating your experience, your consciousness is. Two people facing identical health diagnoses can experience dramatically different outcomes, based not on the severity of their condition, but on the consciousness they bring to it. The external doesn't determine the internal shapes the external. This profound understanding of prayer's causal mechanics connects directly with another frequently misunderstood principle: divine timing. Many sincere spiritual seekers become discouraged when prayers don't manifest immediately, interpreting delays as divine indifference or evidence that prayer doesn't work. Behind the scenes of these apparent delays, however, lies a perfect orchestration that our limited perspective often fails to recognize. The hidden truth is that what appears as divine delay is actually divine preparation. Like a master symphony conductor ensuring every instrument is perfectly tuned before the performance begins, universal intelligence orchestrates countless factors, some visible, many invisible, to create the optimal conditions for manifestation. This preparation may involve aligning circumstances, bringing together key people, or establishing necessary foundations without which your manifestation could not be sustained. Even more significant than external preparation is the development of your own consciousness to receive what you've prayed for. Many prayers require growth in your capacity to hold, maintain, and properly steward what you're requesting. The business owner praying for explosive growth may need to develop management skills first. The person praying for relationship may need to cultivate self-love before partnership. The truth seeker requesting spiritual awakening may need preliminary understanding before deeper revelation. This perspective transforms how you relate to apparent delays, seeing them not as divine reluctance but as divine wisdom, ensuring that when manifestation occurs, it arrives in the most beneficial form at the perfect time. Rather than growing discouraged during waiting periods, you can ask, what preparation might be occurring that I can't yet see? What growth is being invited in me before manifestation can fully appear? If you've experienced unexpected benefits from what initially seemed like disappointing delays in answered prayers, type divine timing in the comments. Now I want to go even deeper into one of the most challenging aspects of spiritual practice, how to interpret those periods when prayer seems to meet with complete silence. These sacred thresholds in our spiritual journey often become pivotal moments that either deepen our understanding or cause us to abandon the path entirely. The revelation that transforms these apparent silences from discouraging dead ends into profound opportunities is recognizing that divine silence never indicates denial. It almost always represents an invitation to deeper trust and surrender. Think about those moments in your life when you've prayed with complete sincerity, followed all the principles of scientific prayer, and yet encountered what appears to be absolute silence. No changes manifest, no guidance emerges, no relief arrives. The natural human tendency is to interpret this silence as rejection, ineffectiveness, or evidence that spiritual principles don't actually work. Behind the scenes of this interpretation, however, lies a fundamental misunderstanding about the deeper purpose of prayer. The hidden truth is that prayer's ultimate aim isn't merely changing conditions, it's transforming you. Those periods of apparent silence often represent crucial thresholds where your consciousness is being invited to make quantum leaps that wouldn't occur if immediate manifestation happened. The silence isn't absence, but presence operating at levels deeper than your current perception can recognize. It's not divine withholding, but divine invitation to move beyond transactional spirituality into authentic communion. This profound mindset shift transforms how you navigate these silent passages. Instead of abandoning practice or doubling down on technique, you begin asking different questions. What might this silence be developing in me? What aspects of my spiritual understanding are being deepened through this experience? What surrender is being invited that my ego resists? These questions open doorways to revelations that immediate manifestation might have prevented. The wisdom traditions have always recognized these silent thresholds as sacred territory. Jesus experienced 40 days in the wilderness before beginning his ministry. Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree through nights of apparent emptiness before enlightenment dawned. Moses wandered 40 years before reaching the promised land. In each case, the silence wasn't divine abandonment, but essential preparation, the cocoon stage before transformation emerges. This understanding connects directly with another fundamental principle that revolutionizes how we approach spiritual practice: the reality that authentic transformation always works from the inside out. Most approaches to prayer focus primarily on changing external conditions while leaving internal states largely unexamined. The revelation that elevates prayer to its true power is recognizing that Spirit always works by transforming inner consciousness first, with external changes following as natural expressions of that inner shift. Think about how a tree grows, not from outside forces manipulating its branches, but from an internal life force pushing outward from within. This same principle applies to every dimension of spiritual unfoldment. Before financial circumstances transform, your consciousness about abundance shifts. Before relationships heal, your inner relationship with yourself evolves. Before health conditions change, your awareness of wholeness expands. The outer always follows the inner, never the reverse. This inside-out principle explains why some people experience seemingly miraculous transformations from minimal prayer, while others engage in extensive practice with little visible result. The difference lies not in technique, but in where attention is focused. Those who concentrate primarily on inner transformation, allowing character, understanding, perception, and consciousness to evolve, inevitably experience outer conditions reorganizing to reflect these inner shifts. Those focused exclusively on changing conditions while resisting inner evolution often encounter frustration despite diligent practice. The journey toward mastering this approach involves a fundamental reversal in how you measure spiritual progress. Rather than evaluating effectiveness primarily through external changes, you begin noticing subtle internal shifts. Greater peace amid challenges, expanded compassion toward difficult people, increasing trust during uncertainty, deepening surrender during apparent delays. These inner transformations, though often invisible to others, represent the actual substance of spiritual evolution from which external changes naturally emerge. Now I want to go even deeper into the profound transformation that represents the culmination of the spiritual journey, the moment when prayer evolves beyond something you do and becomes something you are. This revelation represents perhaps the most significant mindset shift in spiritual development, yet it remains largely undiscovered by those who approach prayer primarily as a technique for getting what they want. The hidden truth, waiting at the heart of spiritual practice, is that advanced prayer involves becoming the very qualities you once affirmed externally. Think about the journey most spiritual seekers experience. We begin by asking for things: health, abundance, peace, love, as if these were external commodities to be acquired. We progress to affirming these qualities as already present, though not yet visible. But the ultimate transformation occurs when we stop affirming altogether, because we've become living embodiments of what we once sought. This is not semantic wordplay, but a fundamental shift in spiritual identity that changes everything about how you experience life. Behind the scenes of every spiritual master's seemingly miraculous demonstrations was this profound state of being. Jesus didn't need to affirm abundance before multiplying loaves and fishes. He had become abundance itself. He didn't need to declare healing before touching the sick. He had become wholeness embodied. This wasn't supernatural power, but the natural expression of completely aligned identity. When your consciousness fully embodies a quality, you no longer need to affirm it, because your very presence radiates it without effort. The journey toward this state involves a gradual transformation, where external declarations become internal recognition, and eventually both dissolve into simple being. You move from saying, "I want peace," to affirming, "I am peace," and ultimately to simply being peace without needing to declare it at all. This progression represents spiritual maturity, the evolution from seeking something outside yourself to recognizing it within, and finally to embodying it so completely that distinction between you and it disappears. This revelation transforms how you measure spiritual progress. Success is no longer gauged primarily by what you get, but by what you become. The ultimate fulfillment of prayer isn't accumulating blessings, but evolving into the living embodiment of blessing itself. This doesn't mean material manifestations cease, quite the opposite. When you become the qualities you once sought, they naturally express through every dimension of your experience without the struggle that characterizes earlier stages of development. The wisdom traditions have always pointed toward this transformation, though religious language often obscures it. The Apostle Paul described it as, "I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me," a state where divine qualities so thoroughly permeate consciousness that they become your identity. This isn't conceptual understanding, but lived experience, a state where love, abundance, peace, and wisdom aren't qualities you seek, but expressions of who you've become. This understanding connects directly with the ultimate purpose of spiritual practice, becoming a living temple through which divine presence expresses without obstruction. Most approaches to prayer focus on making more prayers, perfecting techniques, or accumulating spiritual experiences. The revolutionary insight that transforms practice entirely is recognizing that the goal isn't making better prayers, but becoming a clear channel through which divine intelligence can flow unimpeded into expression. Think about how differently this orientation shapes spiritual practice. Instead of asking, "How can I pray more effectively to get what I want?" you begin asking, "What aspects of my consciousness still obstruct the full expression of divine presence? What limiting beliefs, judgments, or attachments remain to be released?" Prayer becomes less about acquisition and more about removal, clearing away whatever blocks the natural radiation of divine qualities that constitute your true nature. The impact of this shift extends far beyond formal prayer times into every dimension of daily experience. Your primary spiritual work becomes living with such transparency that the qualities of divine mind, intelligence, love, creativity, abundance flow through you without distortion. You become less concerned with specific manifestations and more focused on the clarity of your channel. Paradoxically, this orientation typically produces more profound manifestations than direct pursuit ever could. If you've experienced moments where You weren't trying to manifest something specific, but simply being fully present and aligned, and then watched as unexpected good flowed into your experience. Type "clear channel" in the comments. Now I want to go even deeper into the most profound dimension of prayer, the state of unity consciousness, where the artificial boundaries between you and divine presence dissolve completely. This represents the pinnacle of spiritual unfoldment, yet it's often misunderstood as mystical abstraction rather than practical reality. The transformative revelation that awaits those who persist on the spiritual journey is discovering that at its highest level, prayer isn't communication with God, but communion as God, living in continuous unity with divine mind, making decisions from divine wisdom and acting from divine love. Think about how fundamentally different this orientation is from conventional approaches to spirituality. Most traditions position the human being as fundamentally separate from divine reality, a created being petitioning a distant creator. The revolutionary insight that transforms everything is recognizing that separation exists only in perception, not in reality. The very consciousness reading these words is not merely connected to universal mind. It is universal mind expressing through individualized awareness. This isn't metaphorical, but literal. Your true identity is divine consciousness having a human experience. The journey toward embodying this understanding involves a profound identity shift that changes your entire relationship with prayer. When you truly recognize yourself as individualized divine expression rather than a separate being seeking connection, prayer shifts from communication across a perceived gap to recognition of what has always been true. You're not trying to reach something outside yourself. You're awakening to what you've always been. This revelation doesn't inflate the ego. It dissolves it into something infinitely larger. Behind the scenes of every spiritual master's teachings was this essential truth. Unity consciousness isn't something to be attained through effort, but recognized through awakening. Jesus expressed it when he said, "I and the Father are one, and the kingdom of heaven is within you." Buddha pointed to it through the concept of non-duality. The mystical traditions of all faiths have described this same recognition, that separation is illusion and unity is reality. When this shifts from intellectual concept to lived experience, everything about how you approach prayer transforms. The profound impact of this understanding extends into every decision you make and action you take. When you live from unity consciousness, decisions emerge not from calculated self-interest or fearful protection, but from the intelligence of universal mind expressing through your awareness. You don't need to laboriously figure everything out, because wisdom naturally flows when the obstructions of separate self-sense diminish. Actions spring not from obligation or expectation, but from love's natural expression through your unique embodiment. This level of spiritual development transcends the need for specific techniques, formulas, or structured prayers. The soul evolves beyond requiring particular words or visualizations because divine qualities radiate naturally without conscious effort. This doesn't mean prayer practices cease. They often continue but transform into expressions of gratitude and recognition rather than petition or affirmation. The prayer becomes less about getting something and more about celebrating what already is. Think about how a master musician evolves beyond needing to consciously remember scales or techniques. After years of practice, music flows through them effortlessly. Not because they've forgotten the fundamentals, but because those fundamentals have been so thoroughly integrated that they've become second nature. Similarly, the spiritual practitioner eventually embodies divine qualities so completely that they no longer need conscious techniques to access them. They've become living prayer. This natural radiation of divine attributes, love, wisdom, abundance, creativity, peace, becomes the hallmark of advanced spiritual development. You don't need to try to be loving. Love simply flows through you as your natural state. You don't need to affirm abundance. You recognize abundance as the fundamental nature of reality and naturally participate in its expression. You don't need techniques to access peace. You embody peace even amid external turbulence because you're anchored in something deeper than circumstances. If you've glimpsed moments of this unity consciousness, however brief, where you sensed yourself not as separate from the divine, but as an individualized expression of it, type oneness glimpse in the comments. Now I want to go even deeper into a profound transformation that represents true spiritual maturity, the revolutionary shift from seeking to have divine qualities to simply being the embodiment of those qualities. This evolution in consciousness might seem subtle, but it represents a quantum leap in spiritual development that changes everything about how you experience reality. Behind the scenes of this transformation lies a fundamental reorientation in how you relate to the spiritual dimension of life. Consider the journey most spiritual seekers travel. We begin by wanting to have things, abundance, health, peace, love, as if these were commodities to be acquired and possessed. We progress to recognizing these qualities as our spiritual birthright, affirming them as already given though not yet visible in experience. But the crowning transformation occurs when we transcend both having and affirming to simply being these qualities as our natural state. This isn't semantic wordplay, but a radical shift in identity that revolutionizes spiritual practice. Think about the difference between someone striving to have patience versus someone who has become patience itself. The first experiences patience as something to maintain through effort, a quality that requires constant vigilance and can be lost when circumstances become challenging. The second doesn't need to try to be patient because patience has become their natural response pattern. Not something they possess, but something they are. This same distinction applies to every divine quality you might seek to embody. The impact of this mindset shift extends far beyond formal spiritual practice into every dimension of daily experience. When you're trying to have abundance, you remain in perpetual seeking mode, constantly looking for more evidence of having enough. When you become the embodiment of abundance consciousness, you naturally express generosity, creativity, and expansiveness, regardless of bank account balances. Your fundamental relationship with life shifts from acquisition to expression. This transformation reflects the maturation of spiritual understanding from transactional to transcendent, moving beyond the marketplace mentality where we get spiritual qualities through practice or deservingness. True spiritual development isn't about accumulating virtues like trophies on a shelf, but allowing these qualities to so thoroughly permeate consciousness that they become your default expression. You don't need to try to be loving when you've become love itself. This evolution connects directly with another fundamental principle that revolutionizes spiritual practice, the recognition that every sustained thought becomes a spiritual cause, generating consistent effects according to universal law. This isn't metaphorical, but literal. Thought operates as the primary creative force shaping experience according to precise principles that respond with mathematical exactitude to what you consistently hold in consciousness. The hidden truth that transforms manifestation practice is understanding that thoughts don't occasionally influence reality. They continuously create it according to their quality, intensity, and consistency. Just as gravity doesn't occasionally pull objects toward Earth, but continuously operates as universal law, the creative power of consciousness doesn't sporadically affect your experience, but constantly shapes it, according to what you habitually think, believe, and expect. This revelation explains why some people consistently create positive experiences, while others remain locked in persistent struggle despite similar external circumstances. The difference lies not in luck, worthiness, or divine favoritism, but in the quality of thought consistently held in consciousness. Those who maintain coherent thought patterns aligned with abundance, wholeness, and harmony inevitably experience corresponding effects. Those whose thoughts regularly oscillate between positive expectations and negative fears create mixed results reflecting this internal contradiction. The journey toward mastering this principle involves developing what might be called spiritual coherence, consistency between your conscious affirmations and your subconscious beliefs, between your words and your feelings, between what you declare and what you expect. This coherence doesn't develop overnight, but emerges through progressive alignment of all dimensions of consciousness with the truth you seek to manifest. What makes this understanding so transformative is recognizing that you're not merely influencing reality with occasional positive thoughts, you're literally participating in its ongoing creation through every thought you sustain with conviction. Your consciousness isn't separate from the field of creation, but an active, creative force within it. This isn't mystical philosophy, but practical reality that explains why prayer, when aligned with this understanding, produces consistent results according to exact principles. Now I want to go even deeper into what might be called the ultimate spiritual practice, the transformative art of presence. Throughout our exploration of scientific prayer, we've examined various techniques, principles, and understandings that elevate prayer beyond supplication into a precise science. But the profound revelation that awaits those who persist on this journey is discovering that prayer, in its highest expression, dissolves from being a separate activity into becoming a continuous state of presence with the divine in every moment. Think about how fundamentally different this perspective is from conventional approaches. Most spiritual traditions position prayer as something you do at specific times, a distinct activity separated from ordinary life. The revolutionary insight that transforms everything is recognizing that true prayer isn't primarily about designated moments, but about quality of presence maintained throughout all experience. This doesn't mean structured prayer practices become unnecessary. They often continue as expressions of gratitude and recognition, but they're no longer the primary venue where communion occurs. The mindset shift that catalyzes this transformation involves recognizing that divine presence isn't something found exclusively in meditation rooms, religious buildings, or formal practices. It permeates every molecule of existence, waiting to be recognized in the seemingly mundane moments that constitute the majority of human experience. The checkout line at the grocery store, the meeting at work, the conversation with a stranger, all become opportunities for communion when approached with awakened presence. Behind the scenes of every spiritual master's life was this profound orientation. Jesus didn't compartmentalize his spirituality. His awareness of unity with divine mind permeated every interaction, every conversation, every decision. He didn't step in and out of communion, but maintained it as his natural state while fully engaged with everyday life. This same potential exists within each of us, not as distant spiritual ideal, but as practical possibility available through progressive awakening to what already is. The journey toward this continuous presence involves training, awareness to recognize divine reality within ordinary experience, rather than seeking it beyond ordinary experience. It's less about manufacturing special states and more about perceiving the sacred dimension that exists within this moment exactly as it is. This isn't escapism from reality, but deeper engagement with its fullest dimensions, seeing beyond surface appearances to the living presence expressing through all things. The impact of this practice extends far beyond subjective spiritual fulfillment into practical effectiveness in every dimension of living. Decision-making improves dramatically when informed by the intelligence available through present awareness. Relationships transform when approached from genuine presence rather than mental distraction. Creative capacities expand when connected to the unlimited potential accessible in the present moment. What begins as spiritual practice becomes the foundation for extraordinary living. This understanding connects directly with the ultimate promise of scientific prayer, the completely transformed life. The crowning revelation that awaits those who apply these principles consistently is discovering that the culmination of this practice isn't merely improving life's conditions, but becoming an entirely new expression of life itself. You no longer primarily seek miracles because you've become the miracle. You no longer mainly ask for light because you've become the lamp. Think about the profound liberation this represents. Most spiritual seekers spend years caught in perpetual seeking, always looking for the next breakthrough, the next manifestation, the next spiritual experience. This orientation, though natural in early stages, ultimately perpetuates subtle separation. Through the very structure of seeking, the revolutionary transformation occurs when seeking dissolves into finding, not because you've acquired something new, but because you've recognized what was always present. The transformed life that emerges through consistent application of these principles doesn't mean freedom from all challenges or constant bliss. It means relating to all experience from an entirely different level of consciousness, one that recognizes divine perfection expressing through apparent imperfection, that perceives opportunity within obstacles, that maintains connection to source regardless of circumstances. This isn't positive thinking, but profound seeing that changes your fundamental relationship with reality. What makes this transformation so powerful is how it shifts your entire orientation from primarily receiving to primarily expressing. You move from being mainly a vessel hoping to be filled to becoming a fountain naturally overflowing. You shift from asking, "What can I get from life?" to "What can express through me?" This represents spiritual maturity, the evolution from spiritual consumer to spiritual contributor, from seeking blessings to becoming blessing. You know, if you've journeyed with me all the way to this point, there's something truly remarkable about you. It takes a special kind of spiritual seeker to explore these depths, someone who intuitively recognizes that prayer is far more than religious ritual or desperate pleading. It's a science, a practice, and ultimately a transformation of consciousness itself. This conversation we've been having isn't just theoretical, it's about revolutionizing your relationship with divine reality in ways that create tangible shifts in every dimension of your life. And this journey doesn't end here. Each video on this channel explores another facet of spiritual science, another dimension of the transformed life that's available when we understand the principles behind manifestation. If these ideas have resonated with your soul in a way that feels like remembering rather than learning, I'd love for you to type "divine remembrance" in the comments. There's something powerful about declaring where you stand on this spiritual journey. It affirms your commitment to your own awakening and creates ripples that touch others walking a similar path. The support you offer through a simple like on this video helps ensure these conversations reach others who are seeking this deeper understanding of prayer and manifestation. Each like expands the circle of those who encounter these transformative principles. Right here beside this video, you'll find our exploration of the hidden power of spiritual surrender, a perfect complement to what we've discussed today. It reveals the paradoxical truth that true empowerment comes through letting go rather than controlling. Click and continue this journey with me there, as we explore another dimension of the science of living a divinely guided life. Until we meet again, remember, you're not merely learning to pray more effectively, you're becoming prayer itself, and in that becoming lies the ultimate fulfillment of your spiritual journey.